You're waiting. Waiting for the right time, the right place, the right feeling. But let me tell you, there is no perfect moment. Life doesn't line up like that. Opportunities don't come with neon signs that say, now's the time. They come in the middle of your doubts. They come when you're tired, when you're unsure, when you don't feel ready. There is no perfect moment. Action creates clarity, not waiting. People often sit back and wait for the stars to align, for the conditions to feel right, for the certainty to come before they move. But certainty is not what you get before you act. It is what you earn because you acted. Think about the moments in your own life when you gained the most clarity about what to do next. Did that clarity show up while you sat still, waiting, or did it arrive while you were in motion, trying, failing, adjusting, and learning? Every time you delay action in hopes of a perfect setup, you are training yourself to rely on circumstances instead of building the muscle of decision. That habit of hesitation becomes comfortable. You convince yourself you're being wise, that you're being cautious, that you're just preparing. But really, you're just postponing the very thing that will give you what you're waiting for. Waiting feels safe. It feels responsible. It feels smart. But it's an illusion. Safety doesn't bring growth. Responsibility doesn't mean standing still. And intelligence isn't measured by how long you can avoid taking a risk. The truth is, no one is ever fully ready. Nobody has the complete plan before they begin. If you talk to the people who have achieved something meaningful, they'll all tell you the same thing. They figured it out while they were already moving. They didn't have the answers until they stepped into the unknown. They didn't feel qualified until they showed up and did the work. They didn't know what would happen, but they knew staying in the same place would change nothing. Clarity is a result, not a prerequisite. You don't see the road until you start walking. You don't feel the strength until you lift the weight. You don't hear your own voice until you begin speaking. Action is what turns the fog into a map. Every step forward reveals the next step, and every attempt teaches you something new. You can sit and plan all day, but the plan means nothing without the act of moving. Planning can only take you so far. At some point, planning becomes procrastination. It becomes a disguise for fear, and fear thrives on stillness. The longer you wait, the louder fear becomes. But once you act, fear loses its grip. Once you act, your brain switches from worry to problem solving. Instead of, what if, you start asking, what now? And that question, what now, is the one that moves you forward. You may not know the whole path, but you don't need the whole path. You just need the first step. The first phone call, the first application, the first message, the first workout, the first attempt. That's where clarity begins. That's where momentum is born. And momentum is everything. Momentum is what takes small beginnings and turns them into unstoppable movement. Think about the times you've hesitated, waiting for the right moment. How many opportunities slipped past you because you were waiting for perfect? How many ideas stayed in your head because you thought you weren't ready? How many times did you look back and realize you should have started sooner? We've all been there. And every time we look back, the lesson is the same: waiting didn't help. Acting sooner would have been better. Action gives you experience. Experience gives you clarity, and clarity gives you confidence. That cycle never starts if you don't take the first step. Perfection is the enemy of progress. Waiting for perfection is waiting forever. There will always be something not quite right, not enough money, not enough time, not enough skill, not enough support. But the truth is, you don't need everything to be perfect to start. You just need to start with what you have. Some of the greatest successes in history came from imperfect beginnings. People who didn't have the resources, didn't have the knowledge, didn't have the certainty, but they acted anyway. They learned on the move. They adjusted along the way. And that's why they got clarity, because clarity only comes to those who dare to begin. Action breaks the illusion of perfect timing. Action proves to you that you don't need to wait for the green light. Action teaches you that progress doesn't come from sitting still. It comes from stepping forward. Waiting for the right moment is like waiting for the ocean to calm before you learn how to swim. The ocean never stops moving. Life never stops being messy. If you want to swim, you have to step into the waves as they are. If you want clarity, you have to act right in the middle of the uncertainty. The waves are the point. The uncertainty is the point. That's where you grow. That's where you find out who you are. Every single step you take brings more light to the path. The fog clears because you're moving, not because you waited. And the more you move, the more you see. It's like turning on a flashlight in the dark. The light doesn't show you the entire road. It only shows you a few feet ahead. But those few feet are enough for now. You walk those steps, then the light shows you the next ones. You don't need the entire map. You only need enough light for the next step. That's what action gives you. It gives you the next step, and the next step, and the next, until you look back and realize how far you've come. Clarity doesn't come to those who sit still. It comes to those who move. And the more you move, the more you learn. You learn what works and what doesn't. You learn where your strengths are and where you need to grow. You learn what really matters and what doesn't. But all of that knowledge, all of that clarity, all of that confidence, it only shows up because you had the courage to act without it first. Courage comes after you start, not before you begin. Most people think courage is the thing you wait for before you move, as if one day you'll wake up with the feeling of bravery fully formed, ready to carry you into the unknown. But that's not how courage works. Courage doesn't show up while you sit still. Courage shows up because you moved. The first step is what calls it out of hiding. Action is the trigger that brings courage to the surface. You don't build it by waiting, you build it by doing. You think you're not ready, but you're as ready as you'll ever be, because readiness is not about having no fear, it's about moving with fear. Fear always shows up before you begin. It whispers that you're not prepared enough, not smart enough, not skilled enough, not strong enough. And because fear is loud, people mistake the absence of fear as the sign that they're ready. But the absence of fear never comes. Fear is a permanent passenger. It rides with you every time you face something bigger than yourself. The goal isn't to get rid of fear, it's to move anyway. And when you move anyway, courage arrives. Courage is not the lack of fear. It is movement in spite of fear. That's why it comes after you start, because courage is something you practice, not something you receive as a gift. Think about the first time you did something difficult. The first day at a new school, the first time speaking up in a meeting, the first time confronting someone who hurt you. Were you courageous before you began, or did the courage rise in the middle of the moment? Courage is built in real time in the act itself. It grows as you lean in, as you keep talking, as you keep showing up. And the more you act, the stronger it becomes. But it always follows action, never precedes it. Waiting for courage before you start is like waiting for strength before you lift the weight. You don't get strength without the lift. You don't get courage without the leap. The lift makes you stronger. The leap makes you braver. Action is the doorway. That's why so many people never see courage in themselves, because they never step through the doorway that would bring it out. They keep waiting for a feeling that only comes as a result of starting. The first step will never feel comfortable. That's not a sign you shouldn't take it. That's proof that you should. Discomfort is the birthplace of courage. If you want to grow into the version of yourself that is stronger, wiser, more capable, you have to be willing to act without the safety net of certainty. You have to be willing to walk into the unknown without the guarantee that it will all work out perfectly. Because perfection is not the point. Progress is. Growth is. Becoming more than you were yesterday is. Courage doesn't live in thinking, it lives in doing. You can think all day about what might happen, but courage doesn't live in imagination. It doesn't show up in your mind while you're picturing scenarios. It shows up in the sweat, in the breath, in the moment your hands are shaking and your heart is racing, but you step forward anyway. It shows up when you say yes before you've figured out how, when you raise your hand before you're sure of the answer, when you walk into the room before you feel like you belong. That's courage, and it never would have arrived if you didn't start. The irony is that once you start, courage comes faster than you expect. The fear you thought would paralyze you begins to fade once you move, because action shifts your focus. Instead of staring at what could go wrong, you start dealing with what's actually in front of you. Instead of drowning in what ifs, you begin working with what now. That shift is what gives you courage. You don't have to solve the whole puzzle. You just have to take the first piece and put it down, and then the next piece, and then the next. Look at anyone you admire for their bravery. At one point, they were terrified too. They weren't born fearless. They weren't given some secret formula. They just stepped into the moment before they felt ready. They acted, and then courage arrived. And the more they acted, the more courage they built. Courage compounds. Every time you move without it, you gain more of it. Every time you take a step despite fear, you make the next step easier. What was once impossible becomes familiar. What once terrified you becomes part of who you are. People often confuse confidence and courage. They think they need confidence before they begin, but confidence is just the memory of past courage. It's what you gain after you've acted, after you've seen yourself survive, after you've realized you were stronger than you thought. Confidence doesn't come first, courage does. And courage doesn't come first either, action does. That's the order. Act, then courage arrives, then confidence grows. Flip the order around and you'll stay stuck forever because you'll never feel confident enough before you start. Every time you wait for courage before beginning, you give fear more power. You reinforce the lie that fear is a stop sign instead of a signal. Fear is a signal that you're stepping into something meaningful. Fear is a sign that you're on the edge of growth. And if you wait for fear to vanish, you'll miss every opportunity that could have made you stronger. The only way to weaken fear is to move anyway. Once you move, fear shrinks and courage takes its place. The people who change their lives, the people who build something meaningful, the people who grow into leaders, they all share the same pattern. They acted before they felt ready. They started before courage showed up. And because they acted, courage followed. It always follows. You can't think your way into courage. You can only step your way into it. What do you think about this video? Tell me in the comments